Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here, the Three Topics Gamer, and I have a pretty solid top 5 list video to share with you guys today. Now, recently, they've been announcing a lot of casting for a number of future video game-based movies, and there are also a number of video game movies that are set to be released in the near future. And so I figured it was as good a time as ever to go over which 5 that I think are the absolute worst. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been some video game based movies that I actually thought were pretty decent. I've actually already done that list, so I'll be sure to leave a tag or a link in the description or right above me so you can check out that video after seeing this one. But most of them have been absolute stinkers. Now, I've not seen all of them, but I've seen a good amount of them. So I thought I would go for the top 5 video game based movies that I think are absolute trash and in some cases flat out disrespectful. So if you have to enjoy my ranking, be sure to don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep track of me in all my future videos because I'll be uploading a lot of content over the month of November. So, starting off with number 5 on my list is not going to surprise most people as it comes from the infamous Resident Evil franchise, and it actually has to go to Resident Evil The Last Chapter. I'm just going to say this right now. All these Resident Evil movies past the second one have been awful. And somehow, some way, they always seem to get progressively worse and worse and worse no matter what they did. And by the end, it was without question the worst one that I had seen up to that point. I mean, just messing up so many things. Your story was all over the place. Totally disrespecting the character of Wesker, which pissed me off the most. And I just didn't think the conclusion was a very good payoff for not only people who didn't like these films, but heck, the people who do like these films. I think that they deserved a lot better, even though I don't really think they had much to work with to begin with. So it's just the fact that these movies just continue to fail again and again to learn the lessons of at least the first two and trying to at least make a competent film that in some cases can be entertaining. And that's just the lesson that they refuse to learn. And when you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And those mistakes were definitely biggest in the last entry, which I didn't think was a good payoff after so many years of these films, which is why, without question, Resident Evil, the final chapter, is not only number 5 on my list, but it is the worst in the Resident Evil movie series. Going into number 4 is a film that I kind of almost see as a parody, because I'm not even a big fan of this franchise, but I was just curious to see what it was about, and it ended up being far worse than I thought. And that has to go to Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-li. Now, as someone who is not a Street Fighter fan, I will say this. The Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter film is kind of a guilty pleasure. There are actually things about it I legitimately like, but my god, The Legend of Chun-li makes that film look like an Oscar-worthy film. I mean, there is just... casting is off. The fighting looks ridiculous. The music is dumb. The cinematography... I mean, there's just so many about this that... it looks like a parody. I mean, I don't think anyone was taking this movie too seriously, and the fact that they have the nerve to try to even leave it off of it probably setting off with a possible Street Fighter tournament, and this film also had, without question, the worst, probably the worst representation of a main villain for a video game franchise I've ever seen, and what they did to M. Bison. It was just a joke. There's absolutely nothing about this film that works. Not even as a guilty pleasure. No matter how many times I tried to find something about it that would be good, there was just nothing about it that worked. Which is why, yeah, number 4 has to go to Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-li. I don't think anybody really liked it. Even people who were part of this film could have ever enjoyed anything about it. So let's move on. Number 3 on my list has to go to Doom. I don't know how you screw up such a simple concept. This is a concept that children can understand. Now, I actually was playing Doom when this first came out in the mid-90s as a kid, and even I can understand its concept. You play as a simple Marine who ends up on Mars, and a portal to hell opens up, and you basically are fighting demons. Where the hell did they get this 24th or 27th chromosome crap thing? How hard is it to ruin a simple concept? And heck, you had The Rock in here, who even he seems to be kind of boring in this film, which I don't know how you make a charismatic actor like Dwayne The Rock Johnson boring. And he was even a more piss poor and pathetic villain at the end. Spoiler alert. Now, I will say this. Unlike The Legend of Chun-li, at least I will give this film one thing. I will give it credit for that first person viewpoint section scene, which ultimately was like the best thing in the film. I mean, everything else, I didn't even like the design of the demons or the soldiers or the story that they were trying to tell, but I'll admit, that one section, that one scene, actually kind of worked for me. I thought it was actually pretty cool. But that is about the only thing that it works. I mean, this is without question one of the more boring action films, not just in terms of video game movies, but action films I've ever seen that was just didn't really work too well for me, no matter what they did. It's just the fact that you ruined such a basic concept that could have easily have worked. And heck, you could have done it with such less resources than what they put in. They put so much time and so much effort into such a stupid direction that they had no reason of doing, which ultimately took a film that could have been at least borderline average and just made it painfully underwhelming outside of that one first person shooter section, which is why it's number 3 on my list. This really could have worked, but heck, just didn't for whatever reason. Going into number 2 is a film that I'm sure some of you guys have probably forgotten about. And that has to go to Marky Mark's Max Payne. This film was simply boring, which is a shame because Max Payne was like one of the first ingenuitive games that actually used bullet time. And I have to say this, I don't know how you screw up bullet time. I mean, this movie came out in 2008. The Matrix came out like a decade ago and got bullet time right in that film. So what was this film's excuse? And the fact that its story took a tiny little section and somehow blew it up to being the whole premise of the plot. I mean, why did they feel the need to have this Valkyrie drug be able to summon demons and Valkyries and all this fire? I mean, it was weird. I don't know who the writer of this film was, but I think they played maybe the first section of that game and ran with it, because there are very few cues to the whole premise of Max Payne. I mean, it's, again, just like Doom, was a simple concept that got blown up out of proportion and put in a direction that it had no business going, and because of that, it ended up being a very underwhelming and, dare I say, very boring film to a video game franchise that is action-packed, awesome, and has a great amount of depth and story that could have worked perfectly for a noir-style type of film. And they didn't give us that, which is why it's ranked number 2 on my list. Now, number 1 is painful. Number 1, without question, the worst video game based movie I have ever seen has to go to Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, you guys know me. I absolutely love 1995's Mortal Kombat. It to this day still remains my all-time favorite video game based movie of all time. I would dare say it's borderline great. Without question, I have yet to see a video game based movie be as good as entertaining as that film has. And that was back in the 90s. So it just kind of seems like poetic justice that the best comic-based movie, or video game-based movie, is connected to the worst video game-based movie. I think this film was doomed to begin with, because I've actually had enough time to kind of look at the kind of behind the scenes of what was going on, and it just seemed like Mortal Kombat was such a success that they tried to push this film out as quickly as possible, and because of that, they made so many mistakes. 1, adding way too many characters, telling the wrong type of story, having your fighting be stupid. The only thing that works in this film was the music, which I'll say, music in this film is actually pretty decent, but just everything about it just doesn't work. Adding too many ideas made the film bloated, having too many characters that didn't get developed. Some of the special effects were even awful. And it's just painful because they had all of the necessary parts to, even if you didn't make a movie that was as good as the first one, you at least had some of the elements that would have made it a competent film. And it's just the fact that they tried doing so much. It was a film that was trying to be too ambitious because they felt like they had such a high bar to reach, even though overall, Mortal Kombat, the first one, is just a solid action film, and that's really all they had to go for. And they tried to do too much, and that ended up hurting the film so much that it was just painful to watch. I mean, to go so high and just fall so hard is something that none of these other video game movies were able to do. At least they were focusing on its own ridiculousness. But this one has the just painful reputation of ruining what could have been a very good series of movies. Now, I will say this: this is not nearly as bad. I mean, the most recent Mortal Kombat movie is definitely a step above this, but that's not a very high bar to fill. But this film is just painful to watch. And outside of the music, there's just no reason to watch it unless you want to play a good drinking game out of it. I will say some of the costumes for some of the characters was actually okay, but that's about it. But sadly, this was painful to watch. It's upsetting now. It was upsetting 10 years ago. It was upsetting when I saw this when I was 7 years old, which is why, unfortunately, Mortal Kombat Annihilation is without question the worst video game based movie I've ever seen. So that is my list. Now, if you've seen a good amount of video game based movies that you thought were horrible, share your list with me and everyone else down below. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will catch you all next time.